All right. Well, Amy, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's you're the first person to reach out and yeah, ask about coming on. So that's super cool for me. So I appreciate that. And it's on a yeah, heavier topics that I don't have a lot of people to talk about with.
Mhm.
So I also appreciate that.
No problem. I think that's a common thing we see, right? Is some of the heavy, darker things aren't talked about as much. So I think this is a great platform, and I love what you're doing with the space in your space and being able to talk about anything.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's yeah, I don't know, just trying things out, right? It's somebody's got to do it, so why not me?
I
But
love that.
well, thanks for today. For people that don't know you, um, how would you describe yourself to a room full of people who don't know you?
Other than a clear coffee addict, I am Amy. I am a mother, a wife, a friend, and I'm an amateur gardener. I love to garden and get outside, and that has been a great passion over the years that keeps growing. I have a great sense of humor. I'm passionate and I love helping people. And I think that's a calling that keeps coming back to me. And yeah, I don't know.
I appreciate your gardening pun with growing, so noted. Um, yeah, and one other thing you mentioned or on your profile, I believe, is about cannabis advocacy and
Mhm.
um, I believe even yeah, dealing with the disability system a little bit and all these other pieces of life that not a lot of people have experience with.
Yeah. So I guess,
Right.
and I guess saying I'm a mom is kind of loaded too. I'm a bereaved mother and I'm a
Mm.
canna mom. So there's a few subtitles underneath mom.
I don't know what the cannamom means. Is it just as it sounds, has to do with cannabis and parenting, or
Yeah, so it's a term that I think keeps growing and we use as, yeah, trying to kind of end some stigma around cannabis use, especially as parents, as moms, and using just that term cannamom and,
mm,
that it's okay to use the plant as medicinal, not just recreational reasons. And there's a lot there.
what led you down that path, or how long have you been sort of experimenting with that?
I would say a very long time, off and on. And it's funny because leading up to our conversation today, I actually remembered very, very long ago, I think I was in grade 7 or 8. I remember reading an article about a woman who had multiple sclerosis and she used cannabis to do her day-to-day tasks. It was something that was the only thing that worked for her to get up and clean the house. And I still have the article in like a old photo album because it just
Hmm.
stuck out to me. At that point of my time, I was definitely using more as like recreational, but over time, I was a bigger user and then I kind of stopped using. But then getting into the medical side of it where my husband was very sick with he has primary sclerosis cholangitis. So it's basically a liver disease. It attacks the bile duct, and the only treatment is a liver transplant. And he got really, really sick. And I told him, like, why not try to use cannabis? And he was kind of reluctant and kind of through his process too, waiting to get on the transplant list, wasn't sure, like, okay, I can't just do this. I don't want to jeopardize where I am. So we went, talked to his doctor, got referred. And so basically, he was on medicinal cannabis oil. He would have CBD during the day, which would help his appetite, and
Mm.
then THC at night to help him sleep. Because part of think a lot of ailments and diseases, but especially with his liver disease, he would flip his day and night. So it was really hard for him to actually sleep solid through the night.
Yeah.
And I saw how quickly it helped him and just, being able to eat like he was literally skin and bones at one point. So being able to just be able to eat and function as a human being. So yeah, seeing that firsthand, and I knew it. I knew it from my own research and just stories I had heard about cannabis and how helpful it can be on a medical side. But then being able to see it firsthand, like it was incredible. So he was able to just get a little bit healthier and just be better until he
Yeah.
was able to get his transplant. And then that post transplant, that was one of our questions too, is like, okay, because of all of the anti rejection drugs he's on, can you use cannabis? Is that going to interfere with anything?
Hmm.
And the doctor, specialists, and even the pharmacist, like no, it's you're okay. And like he, especially at the beginning, went for so much blood work
Hmm.
to make sure everything is okay. And basically, yeah, like if you're almost consistent enough, then they'll be able to see if it is interacting with anything. And no, it's not. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and with literally with anything, everything in life, if you take away sleep and you take away food, you have no energy and your health goes down very quickly.
yeah,
But those are the two things that generally go first,
yeah,
right? It's like
yeah.
so it it's that
Interesting.
double-edged sword of what do we do? And even in my own sort of sleep journey, I've tried cannabis as well, and I found I woke up more groggy and feeling tired than I did like even with sleeping poorly. And so at least so
Hmm.
far, I haven't found that sweet spot for me, but it's something that's very intriguing because I hear all these stories, it helps people in so many ways. And one thing that I hadn't uh, put in place the willpower for is the eating aspect because
Hmm.
I very much get snacky and even just full meals. Like I can eat
Yeah,
three meals all before bed, but then I don't sleep well because of that. Right. So
yeah,
it's finding that balance of timeline and how much before I actually lay down. And right, it's
yeah.
don't give
That's a big
myself the
one.
opportunity to eat so much food. But
Yeah.
which I might actually try it again, to be honest, because well, sleeping has once again become more of an issue in the last month or so. So I'm like, man, this is not sustainable
Mhm.
for a long amount of time.
And that's the thing about cannabis as a plant too. It is so complex, and that's also what fascinates me in general. Like it is such a beautiful plant and what it can offer, but the variety within it and what piece of it could help you, could help me, like it differs from everybody. So with and nowadays too, like there's so many strains and there's so many amazing growers that are doing like genetic breeding and stuff like that to hone in on different parts of the plant. So in the
Mhm.
different cannabinoids. And one thing I'm learning right now is CBN is supposed to be the one that helps you sleep. So I want to
Mhm.
go down a bit of a rabbit hole with that too. And a lot of it is it's trial and error because
Mhm.
again, it might work for me, but it's not going to work for you. So I could say till I'm blue in the face, oh yeah, this strain or
Yeah.
smoke this much or eat this much or have this oil, but we're all different. We all have our own cannabinoid system. So that's why it affects us different. So it is a lot of
Yeah.
trial and error. And again, like journaling, writing it down,
Right.
um, which can get a little overwhelming. I'm to like when I started the midnight shift, I was like, okay, I'm going to try different strains. I'm going to try different things. And I had found like, okay, I would, smoke something. And then I'm like, okay, I'm just really high now.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
feel like
Sure.
sleeping because now I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
want to enjoy this.
Yeah. You
So
got the
yeah,
giggles.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like it's that fine balance of trial and error, I think is the best advice I would give to people too. And write down how you feel. And then yeah, did you wake up groggy? Okay. Find
Yeah.
out what terpenes are in there because that's the other thing. Like again, it's not just indica or sativa. There's terpenes, there's all these profiles, the entourage effect. It's so
Hmm.
much. And I only know a piece of it. And sometimes when I talk, it can sound like I know a lot. And
Right.
then I talk to somebody else and I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah. You go to the weed store and some of the staff in those places are just like, I don't know. It's literally a science blurb. Like,
Yes.
look, man, I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm just looking to sleep and I don't want to eat 3 pounds of food.
Yeah.
If there's something to do that, that'd be great. I don't need to know the hows and the whys. I don't even know what a terpene is. Never heard the word before.
Yeah. It's
But
like the smells and the taste, right? And terpenes
oh,
are natural in everything. It's not just like a cannabis thing, right? Like orange, when you smell an orange, that's a terpene.
mhm.
And when they talk about the entourage effect, it's yeah, like the smell and the taste and everything that combines and certain things. And it's interesting. So it's total add on, but so pepper, and I can't remember the terpene correct science name, but I remember hearing long ago, it was like a nutrition show I was watching, and they were talking about the health benefits for your brain of fresh cracked pepper. And
Mhm.
that was something that always stuck out. And now I'm hearing a lot about like the terpene of basically peppery in cannabis and how it can help you. Or if you are too high and getting paranoid, you're supposed to smell black pepper and it will help calm you
Oh,
down. So yeah, it's fascinating what's out there in
Huh.
plants.
Right. Well, and it's yeah, I've never heard of that either, like using a smell to sort of calm the nervous system or to calm the brain.
Right.
I
Well, and that's where like aromatics come from. And I
yeah,
think that really kind of evolved poorly, I'll say. And I won't go too much into like essential oils and everything, but
yeah.
there's definitely benefits to it. It's just, it doesn't need to be so produced and commercialized because
Hmm.
the plants itself, that's where it starts. And we can get it. We can get the raw materials. We don't need to have it produced into something. But yeah, smell is a big one
Hmm.
for us, any of our senses.
Yeah. Did you find like kind of shifting into bereavement a little bit, did you find that your cannabis use shifted or you did like sort of uncovered some new experimenting in that initial sort of state, or how did that work?
Yeah, it's interesting because at that time of my life, I wasn't actively using cannabis. It was
Hmm.
just a point in my life where I wasn't doing it, and that was before legalization as well. So it wasn't like easy to get, and at that point of my life, it wasn't a priority. So I wasn't really using as barely anything.
Hmm.
So then through our journey and becoming bereaved parents, that initial heavy, heavy grief stage, definitely there was more indulgence, eating, drinking, anything, to just, I wouldn't quite say numb the pain, but I guess that's what it comes down to,
Hmm.
right? Is just being heavy in your grief journey. But um, then kind of getting back into cannabis and thinking of it more holistically too, and a healthier version of indulgence, I guess I could say, compared to like
Hmm.
drinking, getting into it, but then being mindful about it, of not making it either a crutch. And I have so much respect for the plant that I didn't want it to be like a bad thing. I didn't want that I had to have it. So that's been kind of throughout my journey as well with grief and just day to day with cannabis use, is that balance of being able to use it as a tool, and still be able to use it recreationally as well, because
Yeah.
it's a fun, recreational, very low side effects
Hmm.
thing to use. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, similar. I've been more into mushrooms in the last 5 or so
mhm,
years, but it's going into whatever journey you're in. And for me, it's been, is this a drug intention or a medicine intention? And there's a
yes,
difference, like, what am I doing right now? Am I looking to I'm just going to get away for a little bit and have a bit of a time? Or am I looking to like, what am I going to learn about myself that I've been covering up? And
yeah,
so those are kind of cannabis is kind of similar in my mind. And am I using it as a drug right now, or is this a plant medicine that I'm using like as a benefit or as a healing or whatever that looks like? But
mm,
at least in my mind, that's sort of separates it from addiction and these types of things, and leaning on
yeah,
things too much. It's like, all right, well, if I'm starting to get away 3 times a week and like, you know,
hmm,
then it's like, okay, well, maybe this is time to shift away and like this is something else going on. I need to, not I need to, I would like to look at, because that's not a path I
hmm,
want to get down to, is this dependency on chemicals, whether they're natural or not. It's like, I
hmm.
don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, but and
it's
that's
that
just my own.
yeah, I would say it's like the intention piece of it. Yeah. Like,
Hmm.
are you looking to numb? Or are you looking potentially for enhancement, right? I think, especially
Hmm.
talking about mushrooms and cannabis, there's so much benefits there, whether you're talking about enlightenment or, yeah, enhancement. It can be a tool. It doesn't have to be a
Yeah.
crutch. It can actually be a useful tool.
So in terms of just my regular questions on the podcast,
Mhm.
uh, along the same line is, how would you describe your relationship with death?
Um, Good. No.
Yeah, good. Familiar?
Open, open,
Sure.
yes. I'll
Sure.
say open and familiar is a good way to put it. And I think especially the loss of a child, it's a piece of death that, again, like we started, that people don't want to talk about. But I think
Mhm.
it's, as weird as it is, it's like it's the worst you can experience. It truly is, that death and that loss. And it's weird because when I was facing with my husband's health, where the risk of him dying was so close and so real, and kind of preparing for it, and it's scary and sad to think about, but also like My relationship with death now is I'm not afraid of it. I'm
Hmm.
not. It's I feel like I've been through the worst and it's not as scary. Previously, before Owen and our loss, that I didn't know much. I didn't have much experience with loss. I didn't lose a grandparent till I was much older and didn't talk about loss, had no coping skills. I think my first visitation I ever went to was actually dating when I was dating my husband. He took me to a visitation
Mm,
just early on in our relationship, and because that's what they did. Him and his family, they showed their support, and whether it was a close family member or a close friend, they go pay their respects. And I went along and I was just like, whoa, it was very kind of eye
yeah.
opening and all of those emotions. And then having it firsthand is, I don't know, it's, yeah. So I'm open with my relationship with death.
Where in terms of timeline did that sort of work? So your husband had some troubles with his liver, and then in terms of Owen and that loss, which came first?
Oh,
Just
Owen was 2015.
okay.
So it was our first child. And he was born in August 2015 and passed away in November 2015. And then
Mm,
Rick so he had ulcerative colitis, like his whole adult life.
right.
And then he was diagnosed with PSC in 2017. It was when we found out we were pregnant with our rainbow baby, our second
Mm,
child, that we found out. It was literally like a month after. We're like,
yeah,
OMG,
of course.
great. And then after a year, he got on the transplant list. And then he was on the transplant list almost exactly 1 year when he was able to get his liver transplant in 2019.
Hmm. Yeah. Did you find Owen sort of shifted how your experience with your husband's health issues, like where I'm going with that in my mind, like with 2015 in April is when that all happened for me. And I don't know, I describe it as the highest mountain is the peak of any loss. Like there's no, my relationship with grief and loss was immediately changed. Like there will never be a deeper pain than that, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
for me. And so the rest of that now since then, it's just very different. It's lighter, um, feeling just in terms of, friends of mine or people that have been close to me over the years. It's a weird shift. And like, yes, it's sad still, but it's just like, I don't know how to describe it. It doesn't feel intense anymore, it's different. And so I'm wondering if that was similar to you with your husband's sort of health things coming in after that. In my mind, I'm like, well, that might have prepared you mentally, like put you in a better place to just be more present and to be just along for that ride.
Yeah, most definitely. And some of the things we learned, and I think on top of becoming a bereaved parent with Owen, we also were medical parents for 3.5 months with him. So his entire life
Yeah,
was in a hospital. So that all on its own, but it does prepare you. And as you know, dealing with the medical system, it is quite a journey on its own as well. So
hmm,
definitely we got a lot of preparation for that. And going in for Rick's ailments, disease, what I don't know how
yeah,
to coin
condition.
that, but yeah, is yeah, I think it obviously it was scary and it was that all thing like too, like, oh my God, like kind of again, like something else is happening to us. And as
Hmm.
he got sicker and sicker, and we're waiting for transplant, and we knew all the risks with transplant too, it it definitely was intense, but like you said, like it didn't seem as intense because I think, yeah, we were in hell and we went through everything with
Hmm.
Owen, and it did prepare us, whether it made us harder, colder. I don't feel it shut us down, but it made the subsequent things easier, and even to dealing with the medical stuff, like asking and pushing things and just kind of being open to help was another thing too, and the
Sure.
support, because when we went through with Owen, we were very closed off in a sense because we were just going through it. We
Yeah.
and that's what kept our sanity and our survival through those days. People would be like, oh, we want to come visit, and we're like, you just can't. Like we're literally on survival mode here ourselves. And but yeah, big preparation. And when it came to like that day of transplant, I remember, and I've had conversations with Rick too. Like he thought he would die that day,
Yeah.
and came to terms with it. And I think this, at least for myself, and why I'm not as afraid of death, is because there is this longing to be with Owen again. I'm not
Right.
afraid because I feel like I will be back with him. So I'm
Mm,
never, for myself, I'm not as afraid of as dying as I ever was, because I feel like, yes, it is the end of physically me
this
here,
form, yeah.
but then I'm with him. And, like there's that longing and always will be there. And I think that's a nice comfort to sink into sometimes, and
Mm,
not to be delusional about it or to try to, self-harm or any means, but having that in the back of your mind. And so with Rick, it's like, okay, I could lose him, but he gets to be with Owen.
yeah.
They will be reunited. And it's a weird morbid thought, but it's so comforting in the time. It really
Yeah.
is.
Well, and it's if you're in this situation, regardless, you might as well try to find some semblance of an upside or a silver lining, or whatever you want to call it. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this could just all be bad. That could be the case, but I don't know. That's just not how my brain's wired anymore. I think it's just you do that so many times over years and years, and it's just an automatic programming thing now. It's like, okay, well, here I am.
What do we have
Nothing,
to do
and there's nothing you
now?
can do about it anyways, right? Like you're already
Yeah.
here. It's not like you can just decide, well, this isn't going to happen. I don't need a liver transplant anymore. I'm going home. It's like, no, and you're not a surgeon. You're not in charge of your immune system and whether it'll reject or not. It's all these things that
Mm-hmm.
are literally, other than trying to sleep, right? You try to rest and recover. There's
Yeah.
nothing else you can do. And that's, I guess, similarly with like child loss. You grasp for some semblance of control or something that you
Mm-hmm.
can do, and there's just literally nothing. And so
Yeah.
that's well, and I guess I'm curious for you too. My experience, like nobody other than family, but like nobody within that system ever asked how I was doing. It's very much centered around the woman, which I think is a good thing. I also think it needs to improve. It was never a thought of, how's he doing? Or, because I had to go to work, right? Like she didn't
Mm-hmm.
work at the time, but, I had 3 days of work off and then back at work I go. And like,
Oh my God, I
it
can't
never, but
imagine.
you know what I mean? Like, so that to me, I was just very eye-opening. And it's like, you're the man, get back to work and just, that's all you need. And I was just like, this is just fucked.
It
But
really amplifies that of like, even like gender stereotyping of like, oh, be a man, right? Like you
yeah.
don't get to be sad, you don't get to cry, you have to be strong and bury those feelings and move on.
Hmm. Yeah, well, like in my presentation last summer, I kind of talked a bit about it, but it took me 5 years to even really ask myself, like, because I'm like, okay, I've done the grieving process. This is like dealt with and whatever. But then it just hit me like a fucking train and I collapsed on the floor. I'm like, never mind. This is
Yeah.
a whole different thing of grief. And it's very eye-opening. And I don't know. Well, actually, I did go to therapy after my ex and I split, but so even that process, well, I did the therapy thing, talked about grief. That's what it, I guess, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get into it further, and I think a little bit of relaxing almost because it's very contracted feeling. There's a lot of like, ugh, there's a heaviness, and as soon as you
Mm-hmm.
think, oh, maybe I'm okay, then it's like, just kidding. Here's a whole
Yeah.
wave of new stuff. Like every
Yeah.
year is different, and that's one of the things that I find interesting. And well, even this year coming up, it's April 11th, so it's that time of year again for me. But it's like there's always
Mm-hmm.
a different feeling coming in, and there's always a different feeling on the day. And I don't know what to even call it. And stillbirth, like, is it still a birthday or is it an anniversary or what do I don't know the terminology.
Yeah. I think peace on that is like it's whatever you want. And I think we need to take some of that power back too, and what you want to use as your term or
Mm,
to honor your daughter, right? It's us. It's not, oh yeah, what should I call it, or
right.
what's accepted. And it's funny, even the term of being a bereaved parent, I've seen many things, children who lose parents, they're orphaned. You lose a spouse, you're a widow or widower. But as
Mm.
a parent, there's no real term. And a bereaved parent is just loss, right? Like it's not an
Yeah.
actual like
No, it's loss of
nickname,
anybody.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of sad that we don't really, it hasn't been acknowledged over all of this time. But other
Hmm.
piece of what you said too with the time, at first they're like, oh, the first year's the hardest. Okay, yeah, especially if you're not familiar with grief and coping. Okay. But I also find that as time keeps going on, it may not be as severe every day, but
Hmm.
it is almost more sad because I can't believe it's been this long now,
Yeah.
right? And it's, you know, for us too, the further I get from some of these memories, I'm so scared of losing them.
Yeah.
Like
You
because we
forget.
only and yeah, it's not as it like intense of a memory, good and
Hmm.
bad. And it's that's sad all in its own. And like we realize, yeah, so I guess because we're both 2015, we're, the 9 years this year.
Hmm.
Next year's 10 years.
I
Like
know.
it's mind blowing of how long it's been. And again, yeah, I feel like that is a piece where, and some people just expect you to get over things. And this type of loss, like you can't, you cannot get over it. I don't care how strong you are or how much you maybe ignore your grief and your pain. It's never gonna go away. It's gonna pop up somewhere, and it's just it's there. It's part of us now.
Well, even as you said too, like the first year, really, you're just pretty much numb.
Hmm.
Like you don't, you're in survival mode. You're like, well, like I said, in my case, I just have to go to work now. So
Yeah.
that's what I'll do. And then like time just elapses and you just keep doing the things. But as the time sort of more time passes, you kind of have that time to reflect back and think again, like, no, like this thing actually happened.
Hmm.
And then actually one year I was moving between a bunch of places. I lost her ashes. I didn't
Oh
know where they
no.
went. And like, so then I dealt with that sort of whole thing. Like, man, how the fuck do I just lose her? She's in
Yeah.
a box and like the box is gone. I don't know. So I had guilt for a while on that and I found her again. I'm like, Jesus,
Oh my God.
you
Yeah.
know, right? But I'm like, how did that happen? And like, oh man,
Oh geez.
I'm curious how that affected, like, in what ways did it bring you and your husband closer? Like, were you married at the time?
Yes. So yeah, we were married
Yeah.
2012. And it's interesting because I had this conspiracy theory about odd years for us.
Mm,
2013, mid-July, I had an accident where I demolished my ankle. And at that point, I actually hit a lot of depression. That was the first time I kind of had something significant happen to me. And in the moment, like it was rough. It was a rough recovery. And then 2015, mid-July, almost to the exact day, that's when I ended up going into the hospital with labor complications with Owen. And yeah, so I'm just like sidebarring there.
hmm.
And then going through that, and in the hospital, so I was on medical bed rest for about 2.5 weeks. We went to our local hospital, then we got moved to London, and then we went to Toronto. And through that, and then he was born after about 2.5 weeks of being in Toronto. And then 3.5 months at his bedside, it was just me and Rick. We stayed at Ronald McDonald House,
Yeah.
which a godsend to
Yeah,
just be able to not
absolutely.
have to worry about anything and be so close to the hospital. But
Hmm.
we saw other couples and other families that like they would fight, they couldn't handle it, or one of them wouldn't be there. And we saw it and we're like, okay, I think like we're doing good. And a big piece that we did was we always talked, and we still do, and we always circle back to our communication when things get a little hairy or a little dark for us. But
Hmm.
I feel it did really connect us. We only had each other, and it's also a bond that we only have, which good and bad sometimes is,
Yeah.
that's we're the only ones that truly like know Owen. And we let family in a couple of times to see him, and that's a slight regret I have,
Mm.
is not letting more in. But and I think during our recovery after like the initial grief, and thankfully Rick did get time off because we were off. There's a form of EI called like pick. It's parents of critically ill children. So we
Okay.
were on that while he was in the hospital, and then that's a whole other fiasco
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
navigation of
I can
being
imagine.
off.
Yeah.
But
Paperwork.
and then being off work, I was off work for I think about another 3 months after. No, it was more than that. But Rick was also off work for a few months after he
Mhm.
died, which was good to have that time together. And then it got to a point where he was ready to go back to work before I was, and I think he kind of had to, process
Yeah.
wise. But
Yeah.
it did. I think we were ones that it it glued us together a little bit more.
Hmm.
Where, like I said, though, I've seen relationships that it's too much, and it's not at fault of either of those people for the relationship. It's not that their relationship wasn't strong enough. It's just when you get sent to hell like that,
Yeah.
it changes you. It changes you, and I think that's a piece to add too. Is we're a lot different, and now almost hitting 9 years in this journey, like we are a lot different. Our relationship's a lot different,
Hmm.
and it's different from when I don't want to call it a honeymoon phase of the grief where we were just together.
Yeah.
But I think we relate back to that sometimes of like we were so strong and so close, like, and now we're not.
Mm.
So good. So yeah, like I feel like something like that can significantly change you and either bring you closer or divide you.
Well, that was kind of people grieve differently. And
Hmm.
so in my case, she wanted to pretend that it didn't happen. She's like, I'm not talking about it. I don't want you to talk about it. I don't want to go to therapy. I don't want you to go to therapy. We're just moving on with things. And so that was the deal. But then at the same time, there's well, again, just in my case, but the fear she had of having it happen again
Hmm.
and that being associated with me. And then the conversations around like, well, what if I can't be a mother and I know you want to be a father. And so now I feel guilty about that. And so
Hmm.
just that whole, it's a very complex thing. And I don't think there's a right and wrong answer. It's just a matter of like, yeah, these are the conversations that people have, and it's going to go one way or the other, right? And in
Hmm.
terms of communication with you, like it's the open communication. It worked, right?
Yeah.
It's you got closer, whereas it was like we're not going to talk about this at all. Like, well, which and honestly, it might work for some people. Like we're just
Yeah.
going to carry on, okay? But anyways, it's when you go, as you said, you go to hell and back with someone, it changes you both, and you
Hmm.
have that. It's an odd connection. That's just the tether will be there, I think, always. And it's
Yeah.
I don't ever think about it really. However, on that day, I always wonder, am I, how's she doing? It's been
Yeah.
so, but
Especially as you process your own, right? Like, and it obviously we, like I said, we all deal with it differently and grieve differently and cope differently. But again, yeah, you have that tether, you have that connection, and I feel, and this would be like kind of an assumption on for you as well, like, but you want your ex to feel it because that's to honor your daughter in a sense,
mm,
right? Like and for me, like I want Rick to be sad and mourn him because like
mm,
that I feel like it would do Owen disjustice if he didn't, right? In
mm,
a sense. So I could see like there could be resentment built up, right? Like you're not talking about this, you're not feeling
mm.
sad, you're ignoring it, you're ignoring her.
Yeah, I don't know. I can see that. I would say for me, I just hope she's doing okay. I know
Mhm.
she's remarried, and she does have a daughter actually. Uh, and to me, that's awesome. It's like, well, that actually shifted something, and life has just turned out that way. And so I
Yeah.
suppose the biggest thing for me is like I have her ashes. So like, what if she wants to see her? Like I can't.
Mhm.
And so that to me is really the bigger part is like, and not that I wouldn't say it's a large concern or whatever, but I almost want to give the ashes to her. It's like, because they're just sitting here, and yes, I feel connected, but I also feel like I've had her in my presence or been in her presence now for 9 years almost. And like, I don't know. It's like, well, maybe she wants her to deal with it herself. So,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
otherwise, yeah, I wish her the best, and I hope they're
Mhm.
happy and healthy. It's like,
Mhm.
um,
But
so
also, I just want to commend you on that too. That just speaks volume of your character and the kind of person you are, right? Like that's the thoughts you have, and your heart goes out, you know, not full of resentment or hate or
mm,
that. So I just commend you on that too. Like again, that shows your character a
well,
lot.
thank you. It's to me, it's resentment. It's exhausting. There and anger is too. Anger is very
Hmm.
energizing. It also depletes internal resources very quickly. And so there's
Yeah.
this cost benefit thing happening at all times. And I think for better or worse, I can intellectualize things very easily most of the time. And so it's almost like a serving a purpose. It's like, is this anger serving me? Sometimes the answer is yes. And as a byproduct of that, I now need to accept the fact that I'm choosing to be very fucking tired for the next few days because of it. Right.
Hmm.
But in resentments, to me, kind of similar. It's like, life's hard enough. Like it truly is at times.
Hmm.
And I don't want to be a long-term cause of anybody's life being more difficult than it needs to be, and that's in the health realm specifically. It's like,
Hmm.
I don't know. You need all the light and energy you can get sometimes. So I would rather focus on that. It's like, how can I be more of that in the world versus this heavy, you know, energy of resentment or anger. So,
Yeah.
but
And
and
that's what
ultimately then I have more energy. And that's
yeah.
so it could be kind of selfish too. It's like, well, I'm already tired. I'd rather be less tired than more tired.
Mhm.
So let's just do that.
Mhm. But it's interesting that I find sometimes the people that do the most good and push the most, not necessarily positivity, but like I said, like
Mm,
light and just good energy and helping others, I find are people that have been through the hardest and the worst things in their lives. And
mm,
it always just makes me wonder, like, it's so interesting to me that, it's not people that have just, whether it's a silver spoon or just have
right.
a skate-free life, great. They're not the ones helping out and volunteering and giving back and helping others. It's
Mm,
people who have been through some hard stuff in their life that, are volunteering, giving back their time, or just generally trying to help people. And just it makes me really wonder as humans how that design is, where
right.
you know, in all, pen and paper and black and white, we should be the ones that are, yeah, angry and
Cynical and yeah,
give
for
me,
sure.
you should help me. But I don't know, it's interesting how that works for us, and that helps us, right? Like I said, there is
Absolutely.
no true selfless act of kindness, right? Because you do get something out of it, even like,
Hmm.
chemically, like our bodies, our emotions, our serotonin levels, all of it, like we
Yeah.
get a kickback from it.
You get dopamine and oxytocin from sharing your story and your grief. And it's, anyway, it's just the whole thing. And I guess that leads into another question. What seems to be, or was there a shift in you that's sort of compelled you to start sharing your story more?
It I think over the years it's kind of done some rises and some dips, but
Right.
part of me why I wanted to share more is just to be able to talk about Owen. I don't They're gone, and nobody knows him and nobody will unless I talk. So that's where I push through a lot of like volunteer and just doing things in his honor to be able to share him and share his journey.
Hmm.
And it's tough because some people are like, oh, I'd love to hear more, but it's like I can't. It's tough to navigate. Like, how do you bring it up? And when people reach out to me, like, oh yeah, I would love to hear more about Owen, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, but like, how do I just bring, like, on a random Friday, do like, hey, do you want to hear the saddest story you'll hear
Yeah.
all week, But
Yeah.
then turning it into almost more empowerment too for myself
Hmm.
is I can share my story and my grief, and and it's so funny that I relate this piece back to this advice actually from RuPaul's Drag Race
Okay.
is when we share and we are vulnerable, that is when people connect with us. And it's predominant throughout the different shows and seasons of the show, but that's where it always sticks out to me. And sometimes I feel like, well, I don't really want to post that, or, is that really gonna, connect or hit with somebody, right?
Yeah.
It's like, but it will, because the more vulnerable we are, somehow it does connect us so greatly and humanizes us. And again, talk about kind of breaking stigma. People don't talk about this. People don't talk about grief. We are not taught coping skills
No.
for almost anything. And I don't want, especially my living children, to not be able to deal with it. And people look at us, and speaking of that too, we've been so open. We have pictures of Owen around. We talk about Owen.
Hmm.
Colin, my oldest, he knows he's a rainbow baby. He talks about it, and people are like, I can't believe you talk to him about that. He knows about death. Like,
Hmm.
death is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's inevitable to everybody, to everything. It's going to happen. So why are we shying away from it? Like,
Hmm.
and obviously being in a respectful manner, not terrifying kids or any by
No.
any means by that, but it's talking about it. So the more we talk about it, the more hopefully people can learn and just feel okay that it, and it's that term too. It's okay not to be okay.
Where my mind goes immediately too, in terms of how many kids do you like have? And that's
So
another
we have,
question, I guess. How do you describe that?
yeah, I love and hate this question, and over the years,
Yeah.
it's been a thing. So the best way my my recent answer is, I have 3 children. I get to parent 2.
Okay.
So I always like to leave it open.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like someone like you would be like, oh, well, what do you mean? Where
Mm-hmm.
someone will just be like, oh, like I don't, I'm
I
not
would,
touching that. I don't want
yeah.
to know, right? Like,
I would assume I know what you mean. I'd probably, like, to answer your question back, like, okay, I know what that means.
mhm.
Probably, yeah.
And I found
But
it really hard when I was pregnant after losing Owen. So it was 2 years after we were pregnant with Colin, and people would, oh, is this your first? And it's like,
right,
I don't really know you. Do I want to answer? If I don't
yeah,
answer, and even still now, it's I feel guilty if I don't acknowledge Owen,
yeah,
and it kills me. And then I hate that. I'm like, what? Why do I feel so guilty? And I'm so in my head
mm,
because this stranger asked me how many kids I have. Like,
mhm,
it's such a loaded question, and again, people are very ignorant about it. They don't understand, and even the whole fertility issues with people too. Like, if they, oh, when are you going to get pregnant, when are you going to have kids? Like, you don't know what you don't know, and the smallest question, whether it's coming from a good place or not, can really be triggering for people. So yeah, over the years, and talking with some other bereaved parents, that's kind of my go-to answer now. Or I'll say, like, technically, and some people, yeah, they'll bite at it. They're like, whoa, like, what do you mean? And then I can
yeah,
say, oh, I lost my first child.
hmm,
Okay. And then, yeah, some people you can tell right away that you're just, whoa. And some days you don't have the energy, and you're just like, I have 2.
yeah.
Carry on, right? Because
Well,
you
then the
just,
power's with you.
yeah. And you don't
Yeah.
want to necessarily open up or give that piece of yourself to that person.
Mhm. My thought, I guess, to come back to where I was going with that initially, having your 2 children, you are still parenting.
Mhm.
Their familiarity with death from a young age will give them the tools and the warmth to the people that they meet in their lives, that they'll just know that. And
Mhm.
that's something that I've come across a lot in my life. There's this sort of immediate understanding that this guy is going to understand me at a level that most people don't even know exists, right? That he sees, because it's,
Mhm.
and there's a sense of not being judged, right? Then there's that ties into immediate safety, that comes into this relief, this lightening of the load of, I don't have to perform, I don't have to pretend.
Mhm.
And, like, when you ask how are you doing, you actually have any, like, interest in finding out, right? And then
Yeah.
also having the space to hold whatever it is comes next, which a
Mhm.
lot of people don't. And so for your children, just having that familiarity with death from a young age, when their friends start having their first experience with death, when whoever, right, even older people, whatever it may be, they'll have that, I don't know what you call it, those tools, that sense of warmth, that openness, that almost
Mhm.
reciprocity in a sense, that
Yeah.
will be felt by the other person, by the proxy of that. And so I guess a long way to say I admire that. Absolutely. That's a great idea.
Mhm. It's yeah, like I would just refer to it as like coping skills, right?
Sure.
Because we all we all have loss at some point, and a triggering thing, I shouldn't say triggering, but in a thought provoking thing is, you know, we all deal with it in a different way. And sometimes your loss may not seem as grand or important to me because of what I've went through. So when I mentioned about when I broke my ankle and I went through heavy depression, at that moment, that was the darkest and the saddest and the worst
Yeah.
thing that's happened. Q 2 years later, that was nothing. And I
Yep.
reflect a lot on that myself when I, met with coworkers or friends or family, and they're going through a hard time, and I'm like, yeah, that's nothing. I hold the
Yeah.
trump card, for life. I've got that trump card.
Yeah.
But for them at that time, that is the end of their world. They are crushed right now.
Hmm.
So having that real life experience myself of like within that 2 year span, I'm like, no, because yeah, that those days were bad. They got a lot worse, yes, but at
Yeah.
that time. So it's being, I guess, truly sympathetic and empathetic to what people go through, that we can't say it's trivial. You break a pencil and you cry.
Mm.
Okay. You can't say like, oh, that's nothing to be sad about. We have no idea what you're actually dealing with, and
Yeah.
maybe, the five other things that happened before that pencil broke. Or
Absolutely.
you were never taught, or you have literally went through life that like nothing has happened
Yeah.
to you, right?
Hmm.
So the smallest thing is the worst, the hardest, that peak of that mountain.
Hmm. And it's my mind goes to your 10 isn't my 10. And
Yes.
so if my interpretation of what you're telling me is that you're at your level 10 right now, I can go to multiple level 10s in my history to bring that empathy forward and to put myself in that space of like, fuck, right?
Mhm.
And so I guess bereavement is one of them, but there's sort of universal uh, agreement upon what should be intense in life. And
Mhm.
child loss, I think most people would agree, is pretty high up on that list. And so, even though there isn't a hierarchy of what's more intense, there also kind of is. And meaning in the sense of you won't judge them, right? You've
Mhm.
been through more. And so now I feel like I'm safe to talk about what I'm going through versus, well, what if you're going to judge me about, how it feels to break my pencil? It's like, well, one, maybe you haven't slept in 3 weeks. Maybe, all these things are true. And I just go out and like, fuck, there's a lot of reasons why that could be that intense right now, you know?
Mhm.
And just having that deep understanding and familiarity with those places and ourselves, it's a superpower. I truly believe that.
Yeah. I love that. And there's something I'm taking so validating of that too. And again, of like your question of like, what is bringing you to talk more, share your story. And I think it's that, right? Of,
Mm,
I've been through a lot of challenges, and I'm still here. And like I said, whether it's pushing me to, do charitable work or whatever it is,
mm,
like I can be a success story, and hopefully that helps and resonates with people. And yeah, your loss or your story or your dealings may not be as severe,
mm.
but we're all human, we all have feelings, and we all go through things. And if
They're
we
still
can
valid.
relate, yeah, they're
Yeah.
valid. I love that. And if we can relate, we don't have to be exact. And that's, I think, a piece that people always try to like, oh,
Yeah.
trying to find this perfect match, or like, no. And there's a just popped into my head too, like the whole yin yang, like that.
Mm,
There's so much beauty in that, and we don't have to be perfect. We can balance each other. And that's actually a piece too, back to a previous question about me and my husband of what worked. We balanced each other. Whereas,
mm,
and even still, and I think we need to kind of reflect on this, is when I'm having a bad day, he picks it up. And that
mm.
was through our medical journey, and as well as through our grief process, and we just did it. It was kind of magical that we were able to do that, because otherwise, yeah, if one's way down here and this one can't pick it up,
Yeah.
then it falls apart, right? You
Yeah.
both fall off the teeter totter. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Now to touch on the gardening piece that you brought in, I
mhm.
kind of my mind goes to like that can be healing in itself in terms of
Yes.
nurturing, in terms of, creativity. And a lot of the time, at least for myself, I find my creativity is very shunted when I'm going through an intense period versus like gardening feels like something you can do all the time potentially
Mhm.
and sort of like almost trick yourself into accessing that creativity. So I'm wondering for you, how did you find gardening played into your healing process? And like, do you have any lessons that you've sort of had? I go to light bulb moments, like in the garden, like boof, epiphany style.
Not quite, but for me, number one is nature and
Mm,
outdoors. I feel such a connection with Owen being outside. And that was early on after losing him where I don't know, I felt his energy and I needed to believe that his energy was out there. And there was I remember looking out my front door and it was snowing. So yeah, it was middle of November. You know, we may get snow, we may not, but it was just I found such beauty in it and I paused. And I feel like that's a lesson he's given me to just pause and reflect. And there's something so energizing about nature. So
yeah,
that I've dived into, and I've tried gardening kind of here and there within our house and our yards. But after that, there is this connection to being outdoors and having my hands in the dirt, but it's almost I don't want to call it mindless, but there's something that I can just be. Yeah, it's
yeah,
just me and the plants and yeah, putting my energy into growing and I love flowers and just that beauty. You
hmm,
tie in pollinators, butterflies and bees and
sure,
just the whole ecosystem is I don't know, it's refreshing, recharging and I just so I'm not necessarily as creative. I have different creative elements I feel,
sure,
but with being outdoors and gardening again, and I feel it when I'm not able to get out once it's nicer and I don't, whether it's been a few days or a week and I haven't been, out just pulling weeds, whatever it is, I feel it. I can feel whether it's pent up
hmm,
emotions, energy, anger. I need it. I need to go out. And I also really like to use cannabis
sure,
for kind of like an enlightenment, going out and just, yeah, being outside with the plants and just pause. It's like a pause. Again, it's that
hmm,
pause and reset of being grounded,
yeah.
literally.
You're doing the
Um,
electron thing with the earth.
yeah, and
Absolutely.
it's powerful and
Hmm.
it's out there. You don't have to pay
Turns out it's
for it.
everywhere. You just have to go right outside there. And there's a
Just go outside.
whole bunch of earth outside.
It's there for the taking. So.
I wonder, this is just an idea. Does Stratford have, I'm assuming there's some sort of a grief structure in Stratford in terms of child loss and those types of things. But I'm wondering, is that something? No, eh? Well, here's an idea in real time. Uh, some sort of like gardening event for grief and whether there's
Oh.
cannabis involved or not or whatever. You get a dozen little shovels at the dollar store and some gloves or whatever. Maybe probably not gloves actually be better, but to
Mhm.
have that organized and to approach whether it's the hospital or whatever and say, here's the thing I'm going to offer at X frequency to anybody that wants to come. It doesn't cost anything. Just show up and cry in the garden
Mhm.
if you need to, or
Yeah.
get that pause, that stillness, and just access the earth. But
Mhm.
I don't know that that never would have crossed my mind to do. Definitely not in my grieving process. Just, I'm going to
Yeah.
go dig some holes and plant some things. But I can absolutely see the utility
Yeah.
in that. So, anyways, that seems like maybe
I
that'd be
love
something for
that.
you in terms of volunteering and whatever.
Yeah. I never put that kind of together for kind of like peer support, but yeah,
Right.
like there and what I like about gardening too is because then you get to right, you get to see the fruits of your labor, whether it's
Yeah.
flowers or vegetables, whatever you're planting. And for me too, self-proclaimed, I know I have control issues.
Sure.
um, so there's something kind of empowering of it too, where you get to control, planting it, and it's a balance because it may not survive or it may
Yeah.
not turn out the way you plan, but something as like a peer support group, whether it's planting something and even just repotting, I think as
Yeah.
simple as that of like, okay, here's some plants, let's make it your own, make a little planter, and then you get
Totally.
that. And whether
Yep.
that's your memorial garden or something
Yep.
that then you can look at and think of that person, right? And
Mhm.
and have that connection again. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's
What?
such a lovely idea.
Thanks. You're yours for the taking.
Thank you. Got it.
I'm not good at growing things, but I have had success growing the amaryllis. I think they're called the
Oh
Christmas
yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
But that
Cool.
in terms of repotting, that came right to mind. I'm like, they're pretty easy to grow like it didn't die. And in fact, it grew full, died, and then grew again, and I didn't even water it. So
Wow.
that was awesome. Yeah, I've pat myself on the back, pretty much a pro gardener.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's something. And then in my so kind of side story on that, my grandfather got my mom an amaryllis every year for Christmas. And so then my mom started getting him one every year for Christmas. And then she also gave me one. But I wonder about doing an amaryllis planting thing with grieving parents and then bringing them to like an old folks home at Christmas time.
Oh yeah. That's so sweet. Yeah. And it's
It's
like
like a
that
full,
full
yeah,
circle moment. Yeah.
right. Anyways, that's an idea. Another one in real time. So
Hmm.
this is why I love. So this is my whole point in the community thing I've been doing. I just love the idea and like, where does this go? I don't know.
Hmm.
There's ideas always coming up. Somebody might do them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Back on to the question of your gifts. I believe we all come to this world with natural gifts. What would you say are some of yours?
Hmm. I feel like this is my lifelong question of also too what paths to take in life. And it does all circle back. And I think in one of our initial conversations, I made a comment about this where I have the gift of talking.
Hmm.
At some points that was used as more of a negative thing, whether in school, not being able to be quiet and that type of thing. But now, harnessing my words and my intents, I feel like that is my gift is I can talk, I can connect with people.
Hmm.
And I feel I don't give myself enough credit sometimes with that, where, I feel like I should feel more, I guess, validation out of it, but I'm coming to realize I don't need to, that I can talk, I can use my gifts to connect in small ways. And I may not know the connections,
Yeah.
but that shouldn't stop me from, yeah, talking and sharing what I can. And my other gift is I call myself a spark plug
Oh,
because for ideas and brainstorming, I love to brainstorm, and that's where I get a lot of creativity. But I can't always, if you just tell me, okay, come up with 4 ideas right now,
yeah.
I'll struggle with it. But if we're talking and that circle, and that's where I call it a spark plug, because I can draw more ideas out of somebody or
Sure.
build on it. And it's so satisfying to be able to kind of come up with these cool ideas, and whether they ever come to fruition or not, but it's,
Yeah.
and to see people start, when the gears start turning and they start coming up with ideas like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
that build up
But
and
then
I
it
feel
grows,
it.
right? It's the soil,
Yeah.
it's the dirt, and now the sunshine, and poof. Now we have a little
Yeah.
plant thing going on, and you just take it home with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I feel very similar. I love that stuff as as it's happened a couple of
Mm-hmm.
times on this already. For
Mm-hmm.
both of us, right? Here's an idea, just comes to mind. But that's part of the fun and conversation. And I think that's also one of the reasons why, well, and even I don't, we've talked like one other time before now,
Mm-hmm.
but very easy to talk to. It's very, you know, flowing conversation. There's lots to talk about. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the willingness to talk about life things in general, people sense that there's not an avoidance or sort of, I don't know. I guess avoidance would be the word I would use, and people
Mm-hmm.
feel that, right? Where it's just like, yeah, where's this going to go? And that's part of the whole thing for this podcast. Make curiosity lead our way. Like, I don't
Yeah.
really know where this is going to go, and that's part of the fun.
Yep. Yep. And it's, don't be afraid to start. I think that's a good life lesson right there too, right? Because
Right.
if you don't start the conversation, you never know where you could lead you to.
Yeah. Yeah, and the ideas that come of it, and that's, inventions or um and not only that, I guess to go more philosophical, but when when we leave a conversation more energized than when we started, that then changes how we are in the world for the rest of the day or for X amount of time. And then every person we talk to or interact with for that day feels that difference. And the ripple goes. And that's the piece of conversation that I love so much is we never know the impact that it has because it's not the point. The point isn't to know, the point is to just have it and then just let it go. Um, well, that's hence the podcast, hence all of this stuff. Like, I don't know, I'm just gonna start doing the thing. So um to kind of wrap things up, I guess two things, but they say that what has got you to where you are isn't what's going to get you to where you want to go. And so with that, I'd love to hear about how your internal dialogue has been shifting lately and how you see it shaping as you move forward into this next season of life.
A loaded question.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it it's so timely, I think, for me too, where I've been at this pinnacle of what's next for me. And I feel finally at a time of my life where I want and I need it to be about me. It's Amy's time. I have been a caregiver, throughout my husband's medical journey for so many years where, it wasn't about me. I, was the breadwinner. I'm the stable one. I have to keep my corporate job because, you
Mhm.
know, we didn't know what was coming next for us for so many years. Where now it's like, but what do I want to do? Where can I use my passions? And yeah, and my
Mhm.
gifts. I love how you asked that, and I'm going to use that internally too, of my gifts to give me
Beautiful.
that purpose, right? Yeah, and
Yeah.
to energize me, because I don't want to keep suppressing myself, because you feel it. And whether it's that anger of so many things. So right now I'm really tapping into my writing,
Mhm.
and it's interesting because it's been very therapeutic for me. And I've been, again, really, really thinking about, okay, what do I want to do? What will bring me that joy? What will spark and keep me driven? And it doesn't have to be a forever. It's just what's next. And that's what I keep
Yeah.
telling myself too. I don't have to have, a 50-year plan. It's just right now. It's right now. So I keep circling back to writing. And I've gotten back into just like daily journaling and just writing when I can. And all of a sudden, in the last few weeks, something has like sparked. And it is that reassurance of this is the time and this is the path. I actually joined, through Sick Kids. They do different kind of sessions and meetings for grieving parents, and I finally joined one because it was grief and writing. And I'm like, okay,
Mm.
this is timely. Let's check it out and let's maybe get some structure, some direction for my writing. And it was such an incredible experience, not only connecting with some other bereaved parents, but being able to share how writing is therapeutic for me and how it helped me through, being in the hospital, and then in
Yeah.
my early grief journey of just writing, and writing to Owen is predominantly what I would do. And we had a moment where we got to write, and I was writing different things, and then we got time to share. And I'm like, oh, I was debating. And I can be shy, but I do, I push myself. I like to talk, and I want to share. And I was kind of I was looking for some validation of my writing.
Hmm.
And I shared a little, a bit of a poem I wrote, and they're all like gasping and like, oh my God, this is so good. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. And
Great.
just right there, I'm like, okay, that's my win. Okay, great. This is fantastic validation. But then it got one step further where Lori, who's the kind of like a grief support part of the PACT, is the team name too. So, when children are hitting palliative care kind of thing,
Hmm.
they're there for you. She mentioned, have you ever thought of being published? There's
Mm.
medical journals that do want perspectives of parents. And I'm like,
Really?
what?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So
Yeah.
it's like all these things lining up. And I had a few weeks prior to joining the session, I had a kind of like a spiritual session with a friend. And one of the things they said to me was they can see my writing in a Toronto hospital.
Hmm.
And it was one of the notes I wrote down. And I'm like, okay, what is happening? Thank you, universe. I'm seeing, I'm hearing you. There's all these things lining up that, like, yes, Amy, this is the path you need to keep going on.
Right.
Now I feel like I just talked in circles and I don't remember
No,
the
that's
question, the loaded question. Um, but yeah, so writing is where I'm tapping into, and that I want to keep pushing. And yeah,
yeah.
some of these signs, whether you look for them, you hear them, you accept them, I feel like they're out there for us, and they're
Mm.
waiting for us. And whether it's our, some people say spirit guides, and whether that's Owen, or whether it's just the general universe trying to guide me in a
Yeah.
way to go that direction, and see how it can help. And that's where I circle back to, is to help people, whether it's my writing and sharing and talking about grief and sadness and all the ugliness in life. It's life. It's still such a part of it. It's not
Yeah.
all curated, beautiful posts. It's not. That's not real life.
It's the analogy I've been using a lot lately. Well, for myself, I find putting words to the things that are floating around in my mind, whether that's the feelings or the whatever, that weight, the contraction, putting words to them, it clears space. I think of it like Tetris, right? There's all these unfinished lines
Mm-hmm.
in our minds. And then eventually, once I start, that's been my writing journey, actually. So I'd be curious about what this is all about. However, you clear the lines, right? You put the words in so you actually identify what is all this gray area and heaviness that I have just carrying around all the time. And putting it down in front of me helps lighten the load. So that's at least
Yeah.
been my experience so far with that healing aspect of writing, whether in grief or in medical and like just in general. Um, that's part of the fun, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, one, impressed about your writing. That's awesome. So, congratulations about all these just things coming up. That's like, yeah, just
Yeah.
excitement. Outcome is one thing, but
Mm-hmm.
process is another. And so, seeing and hearing about you being in process is very exciting. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's awesome. Uh,
Sounds like.
Final question, mom advice.
Mhm.
I'd love if you could share one piece of mom advice that's maybe been louder in your sphere as of late.
The one I feel is always at my core is do what works for you. Do what's best for you and your family. We a lot of times we need support, or we need that validation of what we're doing is right. And whether you're a first time mom or a first time parent, or it's your third or fifth kid, whatever. Hey, every kid's different, every time is different. But do what works for you, because there's no, again, perfectly curated answer. And there's, as long as everyone is safe and healthy, as what you can control is that, and what works for you. And I guess another tail end of that is, don't be afraid to ask questions or to push. And that was something, again, we learned heavily through medical lives, medical
Mm,
obstacles. But now I'm also seeing it in the school system, where
yeah.
these authority figures, they can make you feel a certain way, maybe make you feel less than, because maybe you're not as educated, especially you're talking to doctors and professionals, and you feel like you don't know. Ask those questions, stand up, and if you have that gut feeling, go with it.
Mhm.
Go with it.
Yeah. And the thing I find with doctors is they know what the textbook says, they know what their experience has said. They don't know what your entire life's experience is like.
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, I understand where you're coming from. And also I need to make sure you hear what I'm saying because they don't always line up.
So that was the thing about Owen. He was always the the odd statistic. Even his
Sure.
condition, he had a oh my God, pericardial teratoma, literally like 1 in a billion.
Right.
But everything he went through, how many times we heard, oh, well, that's not normal. Or even for him, they, as a pain med, they give morphine. That's standard. That's your
Sure.
normal. No, he reacted poorly. He needed fentanyl, which is crazy
Yeah.
nowadays when you hear fentanyl, but
No,
so many
it's
things like that of pushing the norms. And that was when we went through it, we sunk into that where, kind of hard to explain, but not that we wanted him to be a guinea pig by any means, but we wanted purpose too for what he was going through. And
mm,
some of the other complications he had, and the specialists, they were intrigued because, yeah, they've never seen this before. And
mm,
can we try this? Can we do this? I'm like, yes, because in fingers crossed, it helps him, it saves him. We always had that hope. But at the
yeah.
very least, they're going to learn from him, and it may
Mhm.
help the next baby or child or person. And
That's it.
that is such a heartwarming thing to sink into, but and it's so tough of and being in the moment and being the parent.
Right.
But yeah, learning and growing from it.
It's yeah, my that resonates very loudly in the sense that I've been part of every drug trial I've ever been asked to participate in. I've tried every experimental thing that anyone's ever asked me to do. And I can say with absolute certainty, there will never be another me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't put into words how that feels to know. Because it's just like I would, I, I would never, I could do everything in my power to make sure that never happens. I'm gonna fucking do it every single time. And I
Mm-hmm.
have, and now I know it's true. And it's just there's a purpose to all of the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of the crazy PTSD and torture and things that happen over the years. It's like, that's never gonna happen again.
Mm-hmm. There's
Never. It's
power in that, right?
just for
Even
me.
hearing
Yeah,
you
it's
say that, you can hear the power of it.
yeah. Well, and it's just the experience, and that's what I hear back from you. It's like it's not that it's easy or that it's nice, but
Mm-hmm.
it might never happen again. And there's a lot of power in that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Amy, and sharing
Appreciate it.
the
Yes.
story and having this conversation with me. It's yeah, it's been great.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the time and the space. And I feel like, again, like we could just talk endlessly on
Yeah.
so many things. And I love, I love the connections too of the parallels we have. And I know, kind of learning about you and hearing from you and our mutual friend, that it's amazing at how many connections you can have with someone that you just like randomly meet. And but it's
Mhm.
uncanny the parallels that you can have with somebody. And there was a thing I recently heard was about that we actually have more in common with each other than we realize. And that's outside of, culture, race, anything. As humans, we have so much more connecting us than we realize.
Well, and to bring it full circle to the conversation, it's like the only way we ever find that out is by talking. And that's here we are.
Love it.
Right? Yeah, no, I appreciate you, Jamie. Thank you again for reaching out. I
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. If you ever need another builder, and I know you mentioned PTSD, that can be a
Oh fuck, right?
whole other topic. Oh my
You're
God.
telling me.
That's a
Yeah.
series.
Yeah. It's how long did it take you to be able to sleep? How many years did you have night terrors? All these other questions, right? It's like,
Mm.
yeah.
And if I'm with PTSD, for me, like I didn't consider myself having PTSD. I was one of those people that I really thought, I'm like, oh, that's for veterans. Like that's for like,
Right.
very intense circumstances. But it's like, but it was intense circumstance.
Yeah.
And not everybody experiences what you went through. And it's it's interesting that through, therapy and counseling and stuff, and then it wasn't till way later when I was diagnosed, like, no, you have PTSD. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like,
Mm,
again, people don't talk about it as much, and yeah, have this thought of like, oh, it's only this one bucket that
right.
it fits. And no, it's much more. And
Well,
yeah.
honestly, my that the light was shined on that for me in speaking to a friend of mine who is a veteran. Like
Mm,
we immediately connected. Like, anyways, just one of those known things, like, oh, this guy fucking knows.
yeah.
And just those conversations, right? And but that really kind of it's like, oh yeah. One of the reasons we connect right away is because like I see your fucked upness and you see mine, and you're like, oh, I know that. Like, huh. I would have thought they were very different because obviously they are. But it's, I mean, to go back to one thing you mentioned too, it's the details of the situation are less important than the
Mhm,
underlying experience. And
mhm,
that's one of the lessons that I've learned a few years ago, and starting to share my own story. Like I have felt alone my whole life because there's literally never been another person like me. And
mhm.
though that feeling is very relatable. So,
Yeah.
right? It's like, ah, boom. Well, get out there and fucking do more of this stuff then. So,
Yeah. Good.
yeah, that's a good lighter note to end things on, I guess, isn't it?
Hmm.
Good. No, I thank you, Amy.
Thank you.